Hello, chess lovers! I have a very beautiful game for you played by Robert James Fischer and Tigran Petrosian. The game was played at 1959 Candidates Tournament. Fischer had white pieces and he started with e4, c6 by Petrosian, Caro-Kann defense, knight c3, d5, knight f3, two knights attack. The purpose of this line is to exclude bishop f5 by black after d takes e4, knight takes e4. And now if bishop f5, then white can play knight g3, if bishop g6, then h4, if h6, then knight d5, and white is getting a strong attack. If bishop h7, then queen h5. This is a very popular trap and every chess player should know this. White can play now a beautiful bishop c4 move. Of course the queen can't be captured because of this checkmate, and if a move like e6, then queen e2 with another deadly threat, knight f7, queen e6, and of course white has a huge advantage. Let's go back, but after knight f3 we see bishop g4, h3, bishop takes f3, queen takes f3, knight f6, d3, e6, g3, preparing to flank to the bishop, bishop b4, threatening d4, bishop d2, d4, knight b1, and bishop takes d2 check. Well, queen b6 is also playable, forcing white to play b3 and create weaknesses on white's queen side, but in this game after knight b1 we see bishop takes d2 check, knight takes d2, e5, bishop g2 c5, black is grabbing more space, white castles king side, knight c6, queen e2 preparing f4 and queen e7. Previously against Fischer, Petrosian had played g5, preventing any f4 moves, and if a move like f4, then after the exchange on e4, in the end of the day black can start exploiting the weakness of g file. And by the way, Petrosian managed to successfully win that game. But in this game he went for queen e7, f4, and Petrosian castles queenside. Of course, castling kingside is also playable, though after f5 white can start a dangerous pawn storm. That's why after f4 Petrosian went for queenside castling. But now Fischer is starting to play on both flanks. This time he plays a3 preparing b4. Knight e8, and there it goes, we see b4 trying to open up the queen side and target black king. C takes b4, knight c4, f6, f takes e5, f takes e5, a takes b4 and knight c7. Well, queen takes b4 is also playable, though it exposes black's queen side too much. After queen takes b4, the following variation can occur. Again, the players have equal chances, but after a takes b4 we see knight c7. Petrosian is choosing a safer line, knight a5, knight b5, and after knight takes c6, b takes c6, this knight is successfully managing to protect black's queen side. Rook f2, probably with the intentions of doubling the rooks on f-file, g6, h4, king b7, h5, and queen takes b4. Well, instead of capturing on b4, it was better first to play rook f8, preventing the rook intrusion, and only then capture on b4. But after h5 we see queen takes b4 straight away, and now white is getting slight edge. Rook f7 check, king b6, queen f2, the queen is also coming. a5, Petrosian has a passed pawn on a file, and now he will try to promote the pawn to a queen. c4, using the fact that the pawn on d4 is pinned and black can't capture en passant. Knight c3, rook f1. Instead of playing rook f1, the engine offers another interesting line, bishop h3. Activating this bishop, if a4 then bishop d7, and then queen f6 can be played, targeting the pawn on c6. A very interesting line, I think. The way white is managing to activate his bishop is very instructive, but after knight c3 Fischer played rook f1. There it goes, a4. This pawn is just unstoppable. Queen f6, and in this position Petrosian made a mistake and played queen c5. Well, it was better to play queen d6, offer an exchange of queens, and at the same time of course protect the pawn. If queen g7, then rook g8, and then if rook b7 check, then king c5. Still black is maintaining a slight advantage, but after queen f6 we see queen c5, which allows Fischer to go for this beautiful tactical shot rook takes h7. And now if rook takes h7, then queen takes d8 check, and then this can be catastrophic for black. That's why after rook takes h7 we see rook f8, and now Fischer is also capturing on g6. Rook takes f1 check, bishop takes f1, and we also see the exchange of rooks on h7, a3, h6. In return, Fischer is pushing his h-pawn, a2, queen g8, a1 queen, the third queen appears on the board, h7, and soon the fourth queen will appear on the board. Look at this position. We have 4 queens on the board. This is a very unique game where on such a high level you can see 4 queens on the board. Queen a7, well, this looks very passive. Actually, queen e1 is better, prevent any g4 moves, because in this case white king can even get checkmated. That's why after queen e1 white should play, for example, queen b8 check, and then after the exchange of queens, king a5, queen takes e5 check, king a4, and actually black pieces are so active that black can easily draw the game. Let's go back, but after h8 queen we see queen a7. And now the g-pawn marches forward, g4, king c5, queen f8. Although in his analysis Fischer says that instead of playing queen f8, queen h2 was stronger, but actually according to chess engines only g5 gives white a huge advantage. Now if queen e7, then king h2, after g6 prevent any possible checks, if king b4, then queen g7, and after the exchange of queens this pawn is actually getting very dangerous. Strange, but this g5 move Fischer didn't take into consideration in his analysis. Instead, we see queen f8 in the game, queen e7 and queen a8. Well, if a move like queen takes e7, then after the exchange of queens, if white tries to push forward this pawn, then black can successfully stop this pawn, and again the position is equal, the players have equal chances. Actually, the queen together with the knight can cooperate successfully. Black is holding, no problem for black. Let's go back. After queen e7 we see queen a8, king b4. Strange, but this king is looking for safety in white's camp. Queen h2, already there are some dangerous threats. The king should be careful, otherwise will get checkmated. For example, just a random move, if queen e6, then black king can get checkmated, or queen a3 was also mating. That's why after queen h2 the king stepped forward once again, king b3. Look at this daring king. Strange, but these two queens are unable to mate this daring king. Queen a1. After the game, a kibitzer asked Petrosian if he thought that c5 in this position, c5, would have won for white. Petrosian, who must have analyzed it for many hours, not knowing of course what Fischer's sealed move was, simply replied, I don't know. But actually yes, this c5 can give white advantage. If queen takes c5, then queen g8 check. If king a3, then queen c2, creating a mating threat, and if queen b4, then g5, and this pawn is actually becoming dangerous. But instead, after king b3 we see queen a1, creating a mating threat, and after queen a3 finally this pair of queens disappears from the board. Queen h6, both attacking the pawn on c6, also supporting the pawn. Queen f7, king g2, king b3, queen d2, queen h7, and a blunder by Fischer, king g3, and Petrosian went for this beautiful tactical shot, queen takes e4. If d takes e4, then this fork is simply finishes up white. That's why after queen takes e4, Fischer played queen f2, queen h1. In his book My 60 Memorable Games, Fischer writes, I offered a draw afraid that he wouldn't accept. Black certainly had the edge now. g5 can be met with e4. After having fought so hard for the draw, however, Petrosian was obviously unprepared to readjust his frame of mind and start playing for a win. So, draw. after queen h1 draw was agreed, but actually this g5 suggested by Fischer is not a good idea. After e4, black is really getting a very dangerous counterplay. Actually, after queen h1, the best move for white is queen f3, which Fischer overlooks. And after queen h6, though black has a slight advantage, but of course this is going to be very hard to realize. The players were extremely tired, and that's why Petrosian didn't risk and after queen h1 agreed to a draw. But in my opinion, he could have waited for Fischer to make a move and then decide what to do. Anyways, though the game ended in a draw, but I think that this was really a very fascinating game, full of interesting ideas and double-edged positions. Thanks for watching, and I hope that you enjoyed this mind-blowing game. Good luck.